Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Gamesphere. Back by popular request, I'm with Drew. Hey, Drew.
Hello. Is that my request?
I literally have had messages saying that they want to see you back on the show.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. Which, to be honest, I do kind of think that the show works quite well with other people on it, rather than me just waffling away at for an hour or so. Although people say they like the waffling, so
I watched your one with Jenny. That was very good.
Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah,
just to get the take of, because the Witcher games are clearly very good games, but I've never taken to them. So it was nice to hear somebody who really loves them talking about them.
Yeah, definitely, because they're games that I've owned for a while now, and they even play through GeForce Now, so I don't even have to bother installing, however big they are.
The latest Witcher game is 14 terabytes.
Oh yeah, well, no surprise there, isn't it? Because it's like, so I can pop it up on GeForce Now when I get that, and I will get that urge at some point. But between all of the just incredibly long and expansive games, because there was Divinity Original Sin. You sent me that for my birthday. Thank you very much for that. Which I've got to crack into. But of course, Crusader Kings. That's pretty.
Yeah. There's some time-consuming games there.
There are, and that's not even, of course, to mention Hades, which I've gotten back into. I've made it up to the Hydra this far.
Oh, cool. Okay, have you beaten the Hydra yet?
No, the Hydra gets me every time.
Okay.
The damage from various different angles is something that I've yet to account for. How far along the line is the Hydra compared to the rest of the journey?
Do you want to say that? It's a bit spoilery.
Is it a bit spoilery?
So, if you give a warning, I guess, if you don't want to know the answer to that, like silence for the next 10 seconds, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
It's halfway, I would say.
Okay. All right.
Or there are 1, 2, 3. There's 4 bosses in total, so yeah.
Okay, so if I can, because I'm not beyond it. Like I can beat this one, and as you say in previous, as you've said before, it's one of those games where, like Meg, the first boss doesn't seem anywhere near as intimidating as she used to.
Yeah.
When you work out, when you just nail down a good strategy to deal with it, basically, it comes down through timing, strategy. Knowing what to do with the peripheral enemies.
Before, the game is very good at teaching you how to play the game without ever feeling like it's teaching you how to play the game. You learn from doing, and you develop a strategy over time. You just get better at controlling the character. So there will come a point when the Hydra seems pretty trivial to you, and it'll be the next one that you're worrying about.
Yeah, I mean the trick is to let the game wash over you, sink yourself into the game, and it reveals parts of it to you over time. When it thinks you're ready for something, it will introduce a new element or whatever. Over time, you'll unlock the weapons, which is the big thing for me. Right, is if you find yourself not getting into Hades immediately there and then. Unlock a few weapons, because the choice of weapons, how your combat style differentiates or differs up, completely changes from weapon to weapon. I'm on the spear.
The spear's good. Yeah.
Did I just unlock the shield when on the last podcast? So that's, in terms of weapons, that's not a million miles away. In fact, I think the shield generally comes after the spear. Can come after the shield depending on what order you want to unlock them out. But I've stuck on the shield now. Because it just gives me the combat flow that I like. It's not really too much more to it other than that, really. Are you still on the shield?
Yeah, I still love the shield. The shield's the only one that I've managed to beat the game with so far. But the shield, I just enjoy the shield. Like, I do better with it, and I enjoy it more. And that's what it's about, right? Like finding the weapon that you enjoy.
Yeah,
you may not. I don't enjoy the sword at all, and some people love the sword. It's Find the one that you like.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm very easily frustrated, as you may notice. And the reason why I bounce off roguelike games usually is just the frustration of like when you die, it's just like, oh, I've lost, I've got to start all over again, kind of thing. Whereas in Hades, that's very minimal. That feeling of like, of course you're frustrated when you die, but it's like, okay, get to go again, take what I've learned, go again. You're like, you've got ideas about how you're going to do it different this time. So it doesn't have that immensely frustrating feel that a lot of roguelikes fall down on. Roguelites, rather.
Yeah. I mean, I always go back to my sort of roguelite or roguelike of my go-to roguelike, which is Heavy Bullets, which, whilst a very simple, very enjoyable game, available Itch and Steam, Stitch for short now. You do get that bouncy offy feeling. It's almost like the further you go, the more bounce you get back off of it in many ways.
Very much so. Yeah.
And it's strange because it's that kind of game where just a few bad moments can just upend you. So you with Heavy Bullets, you're always going through that game on edge, but also like sort of never feeling safe, which is a good, that's good way to engage with you as a game.
That's how you're supposed to feel, but the problem with that is, the you die and you're just like, well, I can't be asked to start right from the beginning again.
No,
whereas Hades is so exquisitely designed that I don't have that feeling really. It's like, right, it's another chance, it's another chance to do it right.
And you get to see what you've unlocked as well. So maybe the next time you'll be able to go in with some slightly better preparation.
Or a new weapon
Yeah, and I think part of what Hades does, and they've clearly focused on this, and I think it pays, is that they've just made the moment-to-moment playing of the game fun. It's fun to...
like almost hypnotic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's... or cathartic, or... like it feels good to be there, and it feels like it's engaging.
It's one of those games where you just slip into the zone, and you're just like you're in the game. There's nothing else, kind of thing.
Yeah. And before you know it, you're at the Hydra, because I think I first came across the Hydra like shortly after I beat Meg. Like it was not that long in that second zone. And it doesn't. It feels like it gets shorter every time. The more you just sort of let the game take you. But
I think you get faster. Because you were saying like when at the point where you basically Meg was about as far as you could get generally. You were saying that took you about half an hour, whereas like a complete run takes me about half an hour. And I think it was the same for me when I was, you just get quicker, you get faster.
Yeah. Well, I think I think I timed the fight where I got to the Hydra for the first time. It took me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I've got and I can imagine myself beating the game in 45 minutes, if not less, if the Hydra is the halfway point. Yeah. But it is kind of remarkable how this is one of those games that pulls you back in to practice at it, and it feels not quite an alien concept, but like. When was the last game that lured you in enough that you would actually train yourself to get better at it?
Well, that's why it is a roguelite, but it feels like roguelikes, because usually I bounce off roguelites because they have that just massive frustration when you die, and because it's skill-based and very physical, it's kind of exhausting, and like I just don't want to do that again. Whereas roguelikes have that. They have that feeling, the same feeling that Hades has. It's like, well, I because it's turn-based and because if you die, it's entirely your fault. Like you learn things every time, and it's like, right, I'll take what I've learned and do better next time. And that's the feeling that Hades has. Or also, and this is shared with Hades. So with Hades, at a certain point, I was like, right, I'm going to stop worrying about how far I get, and I'm just going to sort of treat it as like farming. Like I'm going to farm resources. I'm going to get as much Ribena purple drop stuff as I can get. So so every choice is going to be based on maximizing that, and then I'm going to get everything I can in the mirror. And then when I'm fully tooled up, then I'll try and do a serious run where I try and get to the end. So that sort of changes the way the game feels and takes a lot of pressure off. Like it doesn't matter if you die because you're getting, And I think roguelikes share that. It's like, well, I died this time, but maybe this time I can take this different path that I didn't try last time, and it's explorative.
Yeah, that is a fair point, actually. Yeah. This episode of GameSphere is brought to you by, of course, DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean recently announced their new app platform service, which is a solution to build modern cloud-native apps. With App Platform, you can build, deploy, and scale apps and static websites quickly and easily. Simply point to your GitHub repository and let the App Platform do all the heavy lifting. It has support for Node.js, Python, Go, PHP, Ruby, static sites, and Docker. DigitalOcean runs their app platform on their own infrastructure, so your costs are significantly lower than with other products. Plus, they built this new app platform on top of DigitalOcean Kubernetes, providing a smoother migration path so you can take more control over your infrastructure setup. As a listener of the GameSphere podcast and the Destination Linux network, you can get started for free. And in fact, better than free, because DigitalOcean is giving you $100 of credit when you sign up by going to do.co/DLN. That's do.co/DLN. We want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of the GameSphere and for generally being kind to the Destination Linux network. Thank you very much, DigitalOcean. That's wonderful. I've been playing a fair amount lately, not so much lately, but quite lately, with Hex that you've bounced off, which is Secrets of Grindea. Now, I've talked about it on this podcast before, but you bounced off that one, right?
I didn't really bounce off that one so much as I was awake at the wrong time, so I just wasn't available to play when people were playing it. But there is a little bit of I think I've played a lot of those type of games. Were my favourite type of game for a very long time. So I've played a lot of them, and I think I'm maybe a bit tired of that formula.
Because I saw our friend Hex's follow-up video about it, and he said what he said it was. I mean, I don't. Like it wasn't the best game ever made, or it was.
Yeah, what he said. Yeah.
And he often had referred to the fact that, look, Cyberpunk's just got out. I've got a copy of it. I can play it. Why am I playing Secrets of Grindea?
Yeah.
Right. The game. I mean, the pixel art is nice, but it's not going to, knock you off your seat. Like Hades is a better looking game. Just putting that out there. It's a good looking game as Secrets of Grindea. There's not that much to it. Like, I've not come across anything that I haven't generally seen in an RPG of one stripe or another. I like how they keep it quite simple. It's a very simple premise of you've got some magics, you've got some defensive powers, some offensive powers, sword, shield, bow and arrow.
I think what it is with Grindea, as I'm calling it, is that it's one of those games where you're playing it. It's very clear that the devs have a very solid idea of what they want the game to be, and they're going to make their primary concern is making the best version of that possible, the best version of that idea that they can make. Like they care. It feels like an early indie game where it's just made out of love rather than it's kind of become a business now, right? Even with the indies, it's like you can see where they reined in their ambition in order to make a product that would make them some money. Whereas Grindea is just like a bit like Stardew Valley. It just feels like they would have made this game even if nobody was ever going to buy it.
Yeah,
it's an absolute labour of love, and I think you can feel that, you can see that it's a game. It's a perfect game for people who like those kind of games.
But I mean, the closest game of that type that really drew me in a major way was Pokemon Red and Green.
Right.
Which the game kind of feels a little bit similar to, I guess. Yeah. Like, it certainly feels more like a Pokemon game than the newer Pokemon games. Not that I've really played many of them. They, like, you go to a town, you do some quests, and you move on.
I think it's a blend of that kind of 90s, early 2000s pixel Japanese action RPGs with the Western ARPGs like Diablo style game, and with the puzzly elements of like an adventure game or a more JRPG-ish JRPG on top of it.
Yeah,
it's all of the action RPG genres kind of blended together. I think.
It is, and the spells seem quite balanced and quite satisfying. Um,
Yeah,
they and the spirit of the game kind of feels nice and um, upbeat. Um,
yeah.
a good one to play through the plague. But
Hex and Joe were saying that because it's light-hearted, right? The narrative in
yeah,
it is quite light-hearted. But Hex and Joe said that they came to a certain point in the game where they were just like wrapped by the narrative and like quite feeling quite emotional about what was happening in the story, and like being able to balance that, I think, is quite an accomplishment.
yeah.
These are
I
people in particular is not generally, a narrative-y person. So if the narrative really pulled him in, that says something.
I mean, yeah. With me, it depends very much on the whether or not I'm a narrative person. With Secrets of Grindea, I am not a narrative person. I don't necessarily know why. I guess maybe perhaps just the dialogue at the bottom of the screen is not is not what compels me. I guess maybe.
Yeah, I think you and I are probably virtually identical in terms of our relationship with narrative and mechanics and how the two need to relate for us to care.
Yeah. Although to
It's the
throw,
moral intersexes that pull us in.
yeah. Although Long Live the Queen, one of my favorite games of all time, completely breaks that mold. It is just a
Yeah,
virtual.
yeah, but it's essentially a visual novel, right? It's a very dynamic visual novel, but it's essentially a visual novel, and I can enjoy those as well. The games that are explicitly that.
Yeah, although but it is a difficult game.
Oh wait, no, sorry, I'm thinking of the other one where you swipe left and right for decisions. You're talking
Oh,
about
you're thinking it Reigns.
yeah. Long Live the
Although
Queen,
so,
like the cleanup of Princess Maker, right?
yeah, like it's one of my favorite games, but I think in some ways the mechanics do kind of match the narrative.
Well, it's got that same the games that draw us into the narrative have this melding of they're either entirely narrative where we can just accept that it's just a narrative game, or you have this melding of mechanics and narrative and they just intermesh. It's not like I think we both don't enjoy the kind of games where there's a bit of action and then there's a cutscene and then there's a bit where it's like the distinct things. The game and the narrative are distinct parcels in the game. Like I never get on with that.
I think I agree. Yeah, I've not seen it as that, but I think that's a fair point. Actually, cutscenes in games are something I have a tendency to skip,
Because you feel like the game is being interrupted to tell you some story. It's like, well, shut up, sit down. We just want to tell you a story now. Whereas,
yeah,
again, your Deus Ex, your Morrowind, your Long Live the Queen, they meld the two together such that the narrative is part of the game world as the mechanics are.
I think that gives me a bit of nostalgia actually, because I remember playing through the demo of Half-Life, the first Half-Life, for the first time, and I was blown away by that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. But the thing is, like, what I was blown away at isn't things that you'd look back and think that I'd be blown away at, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I was thinking of Half-Life 1 earlier in exactly that same way.
Yeah, I remember, like, the fact that you have conversations in the world that you're playing, the fact that stuff happens around you as you're exploring the game world, that was what blew me away. Because up until then, it was almost always you shoot out the level, you go to the next level, and then maybe you get a cutscene, like every 5 levels or something.
Yeah. No, Half-Life 1 is like a masterclass on show, don't tell. I mean, exemplified by the train journey at the beginning, which is a bit tedious on a replay, but the first time you play it, you learn everything you need to know about this place that you're in without being told a single thing.
Yeah, and what it's like, and where you're already caught up, like in many ways where you're already caught up to in the story, because the place that you work in Half-Life, you already know that there's some freaky goings on there. Like it wasn't suddenly bam, aliens invaded. They dropped the little hints in the intro.
During that train journey, you learn that you're this company has quite strong ties to the military. You learn that like they don't really care that much about safety. They don't really care about their workers necessarily that much. All that kind of stuff without a single word of dialogue or.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean with Deus Ex as well, like, and I feel that part of this has been lost over the games as the games have gone on. Now with Deus Ex, there is some telling and not showing, particularly with Invisible War, which obviously would be better if they did show. Invisible War by no means a perfect game, but in many cases, like with Half-Life, the original, it was the atmosphere of the world that really told the story to you. And I don't know how much to attribute this to of the time technological limits versus director choice, but like having like empty streets of New York, either because it's nighttime or it's martial law or lockdown or something like that. But like that eeriness was to me what made the character of the Deus Ex games. That you have this big world that has so few people inhabiting it.
I mean, the fact that you've got in one corner of the same map a homeless person begging for money so they can buy drugs to make their life a little bit less hellish, and then you've got these clearly very expensive military robots walking down the street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's just told in the environment. It's not pointed out. You go, oh, that person's poor because he refused to get augmentations, or that person's poor because they were addicted to drugs, or that person's poor because of this. They don't tell you that.
Morrowind was masterful. Not a slightly different thing, I guess, but like in Morrowind, if you're in the cities, there's a plethora of vessels are ceramic and there's metalware and so on and so on. And then you go out into the Ashlander camps, and vessels, containers are made out of like bug shells or bits of crab or
that's amazing.
And chitin and sticks, and every place feels like the culture emerged from the place and from a history. And I think that's in stark contrast to Oblivion, where no matter where you go, everybody's got the same cups, everybody's got the same forks, everybody's got the same. Like Oblivion is good in some ways, but like it just lacks that care, that attention to making it feel like a culture that emerged from a people, a place, and a history.
I mean, thinking on it now, Oblivion could have been improved by having the one main city be the Imperial City, have a little bit of countryside around it, and then just focus on making it more dense, but admittedly over a smaller area. So at least everyone having similar cups kind of makes sense. With Morrowind, you've got a few.
That is the world presented in Oblivion is a more homogenous society than that presented in Morrowind. So it's a bit of an unfair comparison. But the point is that if you just stumble into an Ashlander camp, you know everything you need to know about these people without talking to anybody. Just from the objects that it's almost archaeology, like real-time archaeology, right? Just from the objects that you see around you, you can infer so much about these people. Whereas you go into, is it Leowyn, the most southerly city that's a bit Argonian feeling, and Oblivion, you go there and it's you see Argonians walking around, but that's it, right? There's nothing else that tells you about these people in this place.
That is that's fair. Yeah,
I was actually going to mention this in relation to Dishonored. We both love Deus Ex and Morrowind, right? And Half-Life 1. It was this period of like 3 or 4 years where we had Half-Life 1, Morrowind, Deus Ex. I think there's a few others that I'm probably forgetting. But these games that sort of signaled what the future of gaming was going to be like. This melding of mechanics and narrative and emergence and authored story, and just like all fitting together perfectly, and you in the game feeling like you had absolute freedom. And it's sometimes in Morrowind you kind of do have absolute freedom, and in Deus Ex it's a bit of an illusion, and in Half-Life 1 it's even more of an illusion. But there's a skillfulness in making it feel like you have this infinite choice, right? And we thought, like, after this, games are going to go on this trajectory, and in 10 years' time, games are going to be amazing, like immersive worlds of choice and blah blah blah. And then that never happened, right? After Deus Ex and Morrowind, it went the opposite way. If anything, they scaled back. And then and that's why we're going to bring Dishonored up, because yes, we had Human Revolution in 2011, but Human Revolution felt like that Deus Ex idea again. It didn't feel like where that trajectory was going, right? It felt like it was on the same level. and pretty much the only game I've ever played that felt like it took that trajectory and not amplified, but carried it on in the direction it was going is Dishonored. That does feel like it took that idea and said, let's do more with that.
So yeah, like in some ways, it seems like when you the traits of the open world, all of the what do you call it, the vapid stuff has sort of been brought forward, whereas the meaningful stuff is left behind, right?
We've got tons of open world games now, but they're all empty. The point is these games were open. Incredible, like the openness served the richness, whereas now it's open, empty, boring places.
Yeah, and with the levels in Deus Ex, for example, they weren't that big. I even think one of the problems with Mankind Divided was that it was too big. The main Prague level, and of course being in daytime. I know it sounds like a small thing, but it does completely upturn the Deus Ex feeling for me. It seems like a lot of the bigger game companies, they go, oh yeah, great, open world, because they were selling Morrowind and Oblivion as having these huge game worlds. You could read it on the box. Do you remember when we used to get games on boxes from a shop? And it used to be like, hey, an island the size of the UK or whatever is play and discover and all that. I thought, oh, wow. I was like, now the worlds are bigger. They've never been bigger. Right? Yeah. I mean, how big is like Night City in Cyberpunk or something like that? Like it's going to be massive. Or heck, even, and this is a good game, but still far too big a world, is Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that it's supposed to be in its version of the Nevada desert, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's a lot of area there for not much going on. Yeah. There's a little.
Younger gamers probably aren't going to understand what we're talking about because to them it's like the games have got bigger. What's the problem? But the point, and again, always using Morrowind as the example, is that Morrowind was huge for its time. And you stumbled up. You were forever stumbling upon these things that just made you go, "Wow!" Like whether it was like an amazing treasure at the end of a cool dungeon, or the underground Viking burial is the one I always go to. Like you go through this. I think you start off in a cave, which leads to a tomb, which leads to another cave, which leads to this ancient underground Viking burial. And you're like, first time through, that probably took you like an hour or two to get to the bottom of that dungeon, and you could have missed, the entrances and stuff to all the sub parts of that dungeon. And when you get there, you're just rewarded with this thing. It's not just a spectacle though, because modern games are very good at spectacle. It's back to that previous thing. It's a place that tells you more about the world. This layering of these dungeons tells a story about the world and the people who lived here and how they relate to the people who live here now and how we got into this, blah, blah, blah. It's that blending of mechanics and place and story and history that makes it special. Whereas modern open world games, you just stumble upon a thing that was made for you to stumble upon. It's dull.
Yeah, although with the newer games, I will give kind of an exception. I think the newest games that have done it the best have been Fallout 3 and New Vegas. Do you still count those as new games, or am I showing my age a bit here?
I think I put them in the same category as Oblivion. I think they're weaker than Morrowind, but they're stronger than what came after.
Yeah, like to me, I think Fallout New Vegas might be the end of the golden era.
It's the one game of that type that we disagree on because I really don't like New Vegas. There's a sort of semi-famous Quinton Smith review that he did about it when it came out on RPS, and he slated it. And I agree with everything he says in that review. And most people disagree. Most people seem to love it. I seem to be in the minority on that one. Fallout 3 I quite enjoyed because it was, as it was joked at the time, Oblivion with guns, right? You got a big and it had some interesting stuff in it. It did have some genuinely weird and interesting stuff in it, and that was cool. But then New Vegas felt like Obsidian doing that, which is exactly what it was, right? And to me, that's just the emphasis shifts from the interesting, weird, disconnected, organic feeling world to a very heavily constructed narrative, which I didn't think was particularly well written.
I disagree with that on a number of points. No less, we have had lengthy discussions about which the best side of Fallout New Vegas is, where we haven't with Fallout anything to do with Fallout 3. Now, you might say that's partly down to having a constructed narrative, But how, like, that's a really well constructed narrative that can take any number of twists and turns. Like, each side has a meaningful perspective to bring to the table.
Probably clarify. I think that the structure of the narrative is fine, but it's fine because it's the same game they always make. They make the same. They're the same as BioWare. They just keep making the same game over and reskinning it, right? So that they've got very good at telling that particular story. When I say the writing, I mean the micro, like the dialogue, the characters.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Kind of dull.
Kind of. I think I've always found that problem with games with a certain number of characters. The only game I think can really pull it off, I think was some of the Deus Ex ones, where they get enough voice actors in that it kind of makes the characters feel more, I don't know, characterful. I mean, obviously, the obvious counterexample is Oblivion, where they had like 3 voice actors for everything, and it shows, and it was terrible, and it's not. Oh dear.
But I think weirdly, Morrowind has some amazingly written characters like Vivek, but generally speaking, the characters you interact with aren't particularly well written. They've got a lot of stock dialogue. But in Morrowind, I felt like I built relationships with people, especially the guild leaders who are giving you the quests. You build a relationship with them that's 99% in your head because of what happened when you went out on the mission and then came back, and then they said a thing. Well done, you've got this. And you were imagining a relationship based on what was happening. It wasn't just delivered through the writing. You weren't told what your relationship was with this person. And I think that's something that games have got worse at leaning on. You know, equipping you as far as possible to let your imagination tell the story. And that's
good. Yeah.
I think New Vegas leans that way. They want to make you sit down and tell you a story, whereas Fallout 3 is like, here's a machine in which you can discover your own story.
I'm going to have to sit down and have a think about this one, because I think with Fallout New Vegas, they do open-endedness better than I've seen almost any other game do open-endedness, because you have, first of all, right, you've got, I always measure in my head, right, in any open world game, the earliest point that you have full access to the world around you, right? So in Morrowind, that will be like no time at all, right? 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how long you want to set up your character, right?
Yeah.
Oblivion, you go through a training level, right? With Fallout 3, you go through the first 0 to 11 years of or is it 0 to 21 years of your life, right? Through a whole chapter of plot and dialogue. And then Fallout New Vegas, you have the option of doing a tutorial, which you can miss, and then you're pretty much straight in the world as it operates. And I've always preferred the games where you have that shorter amount of time.
Yeah, I agree.
Before going out into the world. And I think that it was, you know, like the big illustration between Fallout 3 and New Vegas is you have to go through the first, something like 21 years of your life through these various flashback things, which explain why you're the person who you are, but like kind of like it doesn't make sense.
No, I agree.
Because it's like
Liam Neeson badly acting at you the whole time.
How many? Yeah, he did seem to phone it in a little bit. Yeah.
I don't think Bethesda are good at directing voice actors. I think it was, anyway, that's beside the point.
I don't. Yeah, but I mean, I'm fine with poor voice acting, if I'm honest. I mean, I would prefer a Morrowindy style system with your written dialogue, but leave more to your imagination. Because a game that I play that I think is much more in the spirit of the Deus Ex Golden Era games is Neon Struct, which has been out a while now. Minimalist game based kind of around Deus Ex with sort of somewhat mechanics of Thief, the original Thief games. I can't remember if I've talked about this in a recent Game Sphere or whether or not I just remembered taking stock footage from it, because for some reason I remember recording some stock footage from it. That is a game that tells very much that there is written dialogue all throughout that, so none of the characters have voices, because the characters are very like miniature. What's the term? Minimalist in their style. It seems quite natural for them to not have voiced parts, and because there is a plot, but it doesn't really matter. Like there are some, there are some notes of a story that it hits, but for all intents and purposes, a level from this game would be you're in a prison, escape the prison, and you get like graded on has someone seen you? Have you had to knock anyone out? Have any alarms gone off? Have you found all the secret cache locations in any given map? So it takes it down to its raw components, but the storytelling element in this game is it's all done through the sound, to be honest. How they do the background music, right? I know it's not particularly original, but it is beautiful. Is they've got this band called the Home Improvements that were on Bandcamp. They're really good synthwave, but they play on all the radios throughout all the levels.
Right, yeah.
So you don't have a background game.
There's a cinema theory term for when music is delivered as part of the world rather than as a soundtrack as such, and I can't remember what it is, but I love games that deliver music that way.
Yeah, it does that so well because just walking up to it, like it's so difficult to describe because it's a feeling that it gives you. Like walking down this quiet street at night, hearing the music off in the distance, thinking, "Oh, is that a coffee shop with some lights on or something? I'll go and see what's about." And it's like it's building up this sort of experience.
I think that's immersion feeling though between a game that does that well and a modern open world game. In modern open world game, you see something and you're almost thinking, "Oh, the developers want me to go there." Whereas in Morrowind, Deus Ex, and as you're describing Neon Struct, it's I want to go there. I want to see what's happening over there. Yeah,
that's quite a subtle. It's quite a subtle difference to get across, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the things that I liked about Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas' storytelling was that you did have like a lot of these little scenes that told a story in and of themselves.
Yeah.
So, for example, you might go to a. There are some that are quite harrowing. I'll try and think of one that doesn't involve murder.
There's always cannibalism for me. Creeps me the fuck out. When I met cannibals, I would always just execute all of them.
It was like there was the one kid that like locked himself in a safety bunker as like everyone in his village was getting eaten around him by giant ants. And there are lots of little houses in the little village that will have like little scenes of like where a couple were like in bed holding each other as their during their last moments.
Yeah. And if you're playing when you're tired and you're feeling a little bit emotional, that can actually like affect you. A little tear and then move on.
Yeah. Because it's supposed to be like the whole world is set when the bombs dropped, right? Yeah. And it's kind of, it's kind of like a pseudo situation where all the bombs would drop at the exact same time, I'd imagine.
But it's like it's a Pompeian effect, right? You get these frozen.
Because there was like the deputy sheriff, and he was in bed with his mistress. Yeah. That's where you found him, and it's like, oh, he should have been at his post or something. And it's little things like that. Like when they developed the world in New Vegas, they did try and make it so that you would have 3 of the monuments in the world visible at any one time. And I always thought that was a really good element that actually opened up the world in a very open-y way to me. Whereas with Fallout 3, you don't really get that. Not that it hugely...
But again, it feels more... That feels Disneyland to me. That feels a show put on for you, scenery that you're supposed to find, and it's arranged for you to see, rather than the organic stumbling upon something in the middle of nowhere, and it's like something you weren't expecting. It's weird. I do think it's just a subtle thing, but I think it's there.
That is quite interesting that you say that, because it does remind me of an exchange of YouTube video essays between how bad Fallout 3 is versus how bad Fallout New Vegas is.
Right, yeah. They've both got their flaws and they've both got their qualities, right?
Yeah, I mean, one argument was made that with Fallout New Vegas, it opened up an entire world to you that was non-linear, that was yours to explore and build and interact with as you wished, whereas Fallout 3 was like mostly on a linear train. And then the counter argument was actually, well, there's just as much stuff open in Fallout 3, it's just you have to go out there and find it yourself. And then there was an example Yeah, there was an example of like one sort of secret ending to a mission that involved you having a comic book from a factory like the other side of the map, right?
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
It's a really obscure one, and one argued that's a terrible way to bring in a gameplay because like how's the user supposed to know it's there? And
That's
then the counter was and the counter was, well, it's good because it rewards people for actually exploring and
yeah.
engaging in the world, and thinking through, because there was like a link behind it. Like I think the quest itself involved comic book characters, and then you found the comic in the comic book factory, and then you there was some sort of like,
I think that's the big distinction. I think that's is on the nail on the head between the Morrowind games and the more modern games. Is in Morrowind the stuff designed such that only 0.01% of players are ever going to see it, whereas the more modern games are like they want a high proportion. I'm not going to say everybody, but they want a high proportion to see it for it to be worth it, which makes everything less special. Because if you do find the thing that, because you know by the path you took that it feels like only you are going to see this, and that feels special. Only you figured out the comic book thing. Like, you actually did something clever. You did something unique. It feels unique.
Yeah, I think that's it, because the trouble is when you've got a game that's too on rails, it might as well be a movie. And that's where I do bounce off from narrative games more often than mechanical games. Like a game like Shapes, or a game like Battle for Wesnoth or something. I don't know why those are the two that came to mind. Very mechanical, or even Heavy Bullets. Like they're just all mechanics at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think we both lean mechanics first.
Yeah, because that, to me, that's using the medium.
Yes.
It's like telling a story, telling like a very narrative story through a computer game. It's a bit like trying to read an audiobook over the television. Like you can do it, but it's not really the
agency is the things that games have that no other medium has, with the exception of like choose your own adventure books, right? In which case it's a very shallow agency.
But also a very basic game.
If a game is not making use of agency, and then it's not making use of its medium.
Yeah, exactly.
I will just very quickly. I mean, Fallout 3 is not a game that I love. It's a game that I like. And two huge flaws with Fallout 3 are the opening, which is awful, and even also the unforgivable ending.
Yeah. Everything in the middle I can tolerate is great, though. But I
for anybody who doesn't know, and spoilers, but this game's a million years old now. In the end, you can be friends with a super mutant, right, who is immune to radiation. And there's a situation where you have to go into an irradiated booth to press a switch or something. So obviously, you turn to your radiation-proof friend and you say, why don't you go in and do the switch for me? And he says something like, no, I think this is something you should do for yourself. So you have to go into the booth at the end and kill yourself.
Yeah, because we need a narrative climax. Go in there and do it yourself.
Which is just dumb.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, that was disastrous. Especially considering the companion, the radioactive resistant companion that you can have, he's not added in through DLC or a mod or anything like that. Like he was there right in the first version of the game.
Yeah, and you're not necessarily going to have him at the end, but he's one of the more attractive companions, right?
He comes into the game if you've got high enough karma, but the overwhelming majority of people will play that game with high karma.
Yeah.
More people will. I'm tempted to say, unless he's died in a previous battle, people are more likely to have him than not, to be honest.
And even if he's only a 5% chance of having him at the end, that writing is just it's just inexcusable. Like, at least come up with a better narrative. Like, make him not be there at the end. He's got to go off and take care of something or something. Because no, I think you should take care of this yourself. That's absurd. It's just absurd, right?
What makes it even more absurd is they're right around when the Broken Steel, I think it's Broken Steel DLC got released. And they made content past the ending point there.
Right.
And what they did to explain it is that you could send in Forks, the super mutant, and then the game. Is it Randy Newman who does the voice or something? He says, like, he basically calls you a coward because you didn't go in yourself. And it's like,
okay. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's like
Mad.
So they don't even try and fix it with broken steel. That, yeah, all right. The beginning and the end. Fallout 3 is disastrous.
Like New Vegas gets those parts absolutely right.
And some of the
were great. Like there's a lot I like about New Vegas. It's just there's this group of companies, BioWare, Black Isle, Obsidian, who are all sort of related. I think they share employees and they've drifted in that. And I don't like any of their games. And it's the writing. I find the writing unnatural and clunky. And it just always makes me, even if I like the mechanics and the situations and the broad arc of the story, the writing just makes me just bounce off it. The only games I've managed to play all the way through of theirs is like Mass Effect, and even that, it was a struggle.
That Mass Effect is a complicated one, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when you get into the sequels.
Yeah, I mean, I like Mass Effect 2 is my favorite of the three games.
Yeah, that's the one where I was just like, no, they've gone too far into this BioWare nonsense for me.
How interesting! Because the first one I always felt was too long. The levels were too long.
I like long games. I like long, minimally written games, and the first one was more that. Although there's that bit at the beginning where you've got two people in your party who are both obnoxious fascists, and the game asks you which one you want to kill, and both is not an option. Bothered me.
I don't know if Caden was that bad, was he?
They were both a bit like, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'll have to I'll go back on that one. I know that they retconned some of that back into the character. You know, like they've rolled that back in.
Oh, really?
By the third one. The third one's ending was pretty bad, though.
Well, it's mythically bad, right? It's the one that's gone down. If they mention it in Silicon Valley, somebody is compared to the ending to Mass Effect 3.
Yeah, it was like it was quite a good game.
But I watched it, and it is. I mean, it's just an insulting ending, right?
Yeah, like I enjoyed the game right up to the last 20 minutes of it.
Oh, there was a thing with 1 and 2. This might be 1 and 2. This might be 2 and 3. I forget. But Mass Effect 1 ends, and then they released a DLC which takes place between Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, I think, where one of the things your character can do is accidentally commit genocide. And then at the opening of, I think it's Mass Effect 2, I forget, but like you're on trial for genocide or something. So if you didn't play that DLC, you're like, I did what?
I'm not familiar with the DLCs.
Like the DLC is canon in the one that follows it, and if you didn't play the DLC, it's like, I don't remember doing this.
I'm not sure. That could be. You say accidentally commit genocide. I think there are a few cases where genocide could happen. So and you do have to tend to answer for them.
I think there should be a genre and a tag on Steam. Genocide can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I get the ending of Mass Effect 3 was it was going all right up until the last 20 minutes, and then it just kind of tried to do that thing where it overtly goes philosophical, but it kind of hasn't laid the philosophical groundwork for it.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Yeah,
it's like you had this really epic story, but I think how you have this this idea that Game of Thrones was always rubbish. It was just the first couple of seasons that tricked you into not thinking it was rubbish. Yeah. I kind of feel a little bit like that with Mass Effect, is that Mass Effect might always have been rubbish. It's just when you see that point where it's supposed to all come together, it just flopped about a bit and fell down. Yeah. That's when you realize that the foundations were never there. Like it had this end of the world story, but it didn't have it didn't have the meaning or the truth it had bits of the humanity beneath it, right? Like you had missions that involved you helping refugees that were living out of shipping containers and stuff like that. Like bits of it, they did really well. And it's those little bits that I really like, and it's those little bits that I remember. But at the end of the day, aliens come, they want to wipe out the world. It's about the philosophical depth of it.
This applies to games, and it applies perhaps even more to TV stuff. I'm becoming more and more aware of the distinction between stuff where they're making it up as they go along and stuff where they knew what the ending was when they wrote the beginning, right?
Oh, God, yes. To me, that makes...
It's not something I've thought about in previous decades, but it's like Battlestar Galactica is an example of it doing it wrong, where they didn't know where they were going and they made it up and they reacted to the fans too much, and
yeah.
Whereas Expanse is I've sung the praises of Expanse to you, but Expanse, it's so clear that the stuff in season 1 that is very subtle foreshadowing of stuff that doesn't happen until 5 seasons later, right? They know what their story is and they are telling it.
Yeah. There's a literary terms for these. They're called planners and pantsers. So planners will plan the story from beginning to end. They'll build it like they'll have a skeletal framework and they'll put meat on the bones. Yeah. And then the pantsers are like fly by the seat of your pants, which is they'll just put a bunch of characters in a room and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, the latter can work, I'm sure, but I'm not sure it works. It doesn't work in something that's supposed to have this grand narrative that has philosophical implications, and
Yeah. Now the rumor with Mass Effect is that the final plot got leaked and they changed it too late.
Yeah, don't change it if it gets leaked. Like, what proportion of your players are going to read the leaks? And the one who do read the leaks, they know what they're doing. It's fine.
Yeah, and they've already bought your game, I'm sure. So
yeah.
It's to me I definitely I almost want to have a little yes no sticker on the back of every book I buy. Has this story been planned out properly, or has did some guy just put some witty characters in a room together?
Like TV shows are where it matters the most for me. With a game, if you enjoy the mechanics, you enjoy the world, you can forgive it to some extent, right? But with a TV show, when it just keeps all that invested time is just thrown back in your face, kind of thing.
All kinds of terrible things can happen when you don't take care of your digital security, and that, of course, includes your passwords. The password manager used and trusted by the Destination Linux network is Bitwarden. Bitwarden lets you set up things like a PIN to easily access your password manager, as well as additional authentication such as master passwords and adding phrases to fingerprint security, all the things to keep your passwords safe. Bitwarden is the easiest and safest way for individuals, teams and businesses to store, share and sync sensitive data. Go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started for free. To make things even better, Bitwarden is 100% open source. You can self-host and their code is audited. Go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started for free. The $10 a year premium account gets you 1 gigabyte of encrypted file storage, 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F, Duo, Vault Health Reports, time-based one-time password authenticator storage and generation, priority customer support. So, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank Bitwarden for sponsoring this episode of Gamesphere and for all round being a good egg to the Destination Linux network. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's I think it's even more noticeable when they've got a trilogy, and they've especially if they did the first movie in and of itself, and then they stretched it out to a trilogy. So they've got 2 films where where really there's only 1 film's worth of stuff in there. Merchandising reasons, isn't it?
The best modern example, I guess, of making it up as you go along, and added to each director contradicting the previous director is the recent Star Wars films, right? The recent Star Wars main trilogy.
Yeah.
They didn't know where they were going at the start quite clearly, and each director has got a different idea of what story they want to tell. So it's just an absolute mess.
It isn't. Yeah.
And then of that working, I guess, is the the Marvel stories, the Marvel movies. They I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but they add up to something worthwhile, and that was just individual stories told within a world.
Yeah. I kind of liked how Marvel did it. I didn't like all of the Marvel characters, but then you don't have to. That's kind of the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
and it works for a sitcom. You don't need to know the narrative arc of a sitcom at the beginning, but it doesn't work for Game of Thrones, and it wouldn't have worked. The Expanse is the shining example of doing it right for me.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I reserve that series, particularly of the character-based variety, do not have as long a shelf life as most producers think that they do. I think you get bored.
They were extended in the television era, weren't they, for advertising reasons? Whereas in the Netflix era, they don't need to be. They can just do a couple of seasons and go, "Yep, we're done," and that's healthier.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always been a tragedy of television and cinema to a lesser degree that it's dragged on for merchandising and advertising and all those kind of reasons. But knowing when to end is as important as knowing when to begin. Right, we're desperate. We're actually running out of time, but there was a game I did want to talk to you about. NERTZ,
which is made by Zachtronics, who are responsible for Space Chem and Opus Magnum and Shenzhen.io and Exopunks, which are all really hard puzzle games that make me feel like an idiot. And they've made this. They're clearly fond of solitaire. Like solitaire pops up in their games now and then. They've made competitive multiplayer solitaire with your friends, and it's amazing fun. It's a real world game, by the way. NERTZ. It's a real thing. It's not something they've invented.
So you can play it with an actual deck of. How many decks of cards do you use to play with it?
You need a deck of cards per person. So you're all essentially individually playing solitaire, but there's this stack of cards which in the game we call the NERTZ stack, which once you get rid of those, you can press the NERTZ button, and then you give everybody else. You end that round, and you give everybody else negative points, and it's first to 100. So you keep playing solitaire until somebody gets to 100 points. But it's just utterly frantic. You take a game that solitaire is usually a game that people play to relax, to chill out, right? You can play as slow as you like, and it's about thinking, and it doesn't matter if you get distracted for 10 minutes, that kind of thing. And this is the opposite of that. It's speed really, really matters. And when you put, you're in certain solitaire games where you put your aces up at the top and then you pile everything on top of those aces.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing that in the middle. So you can put your cards on anybody's ace. So in a 6-player game, there's what's 6 times 4? 24?
24.
24 aces to think about, right? As you're also playing solitaire and as you're also trying to get rid of this NERTZ pile. So it's just utterly overwhelming, but everybody's overwhelmed. Everybody's feeling the same thing. And when somebody puts down a card on a place where you wanted to put down a card, it's like, you'd like a moment of just sheer anger and frustration, and then you get back to playing your solitaire. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful game to play with your friends.
That does sound amazing. So if you know solitaire, you know the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We
got a 6-player game going last night, and it was everybody was just clearly. And it's funny, like we're all in voice chat, and while you're playing, it's silent apart from just. It's just everybody's concentrating really hard.
Oh wow! Yeah, no, I did see that game you had going last night. I did. At that moment, I did know NERTZ was. Because didn't you say something? You said, Chris, NERTZ, or was it you? So people keep NERTZ just.
yeah. It's absorbed us a bit. So in chat, everybody now and then somebody will just say NERTZ, and everybody else will go NERTZ.
That's amazing.
And the presentation of the game as well. So when you start the game, when everybody presses ready and the game starts, it plays like boxing introduction music, like 80s style, Rocky style, overly dramatic music before you all start playing solitaire. And then when somebody does a NERTZ, which is getting rid of your NERTZ pile and pressing the NERTZ button, the game goes NERTZ. And there was an instance where I was playing with Matt, and he NERTZed, which essentially ends the game, but you can carry on playing with the cards you've got. And I got rid of my NERTZ pile after he'd done a NERTZ, and the game went technical NERTZ, and we just like fell over laughing at that. It's lovely.
That is amazing. I'm looking at it now. Some videos of. So you can play. What kind of players? I'm watching 2 players play it at the moment, but you said
1 to 6. You can play it on your own, in which case it's just solitaire. Up to 6 people. Yeah.
Up to 6 people. After 6 people, does it get a bit mad?
That's just the most you can play with. That's the most. The game doesn't accommodate for more than 6 because it would be not playable by humans at that point.
Oh, okay. What about by robots?
Robots could probably play it very well. Yeah.
And you have to get this.
Usually in solitaire, there's an obvious right move, right? There's a thing that is strategically the best thing you can do. Whereas because you've got so much to think about, and you're thinking about not just because you're not just trying to finish your solitaire columns. What you're really trying to do is get rid of your NERTZ pile. So the columns exist in service of that, as does the stuff in the middle. So it's not always necessarily the best thing to do to play every card. You want to look at how everybody else is doing. It's interestingly, and none of us have a grip on the strategy of it yet. We're just playing by the seat of our pants, and that's kind of fun, and working it out as we go along.
What is the NERTZ pile again?
The NERTZ pile is just a pile of face-down cards with the top one face up that you've got to get rid of that pile.
Oh, that. I'm sure there's a solitaire name for it.
There is, yeah. That is a very solitaire, and I've forgotten the name for it.
The solitaire pile.
yeah. It's okay. So NERTZ is Canfield, a variant of Klondike solitaire played multiplayer. So if you played this game on your own, it's called Canfield, apparently.
Oh, okay. But basically, and it's a free-to-play game, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely free, and it's 200 megabytes. And when you launch it, it feels like it launches before you even press the button. It's just instantly there. It's the simplest menu in the world. You just press start game, and then anybody on your friends list can see that you're playing a game and immediately hop in.
Oh, okay. Just a side note. Interesting for a free-to-play game. Our friend Arch Toasty has put it on his wish list.
I think I did that. I put it on my wish list and then went back to the page and went, "Oh, it's free, right? Okay."
Oh, I'm sure they pay him more at Red Hat than that. But I just imagine like Arch Toasty just up against the screen going, "Oh, why can't I have it?" It looks manic with 4.
Oh, with 6, it's we all said at the end, like it's too much to think. You have to rein in how much you're considering, kind of thing. Yeah, I'm just going to think about these cards over here. But it's great.
Yeah, I'm actually going to install it right now.
Do you want to play a quick game after we're done talking?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've hit the hour mark, so I don't know what that is with the sponsors in, but yeah. I think this is probably a good time to wrap it up. Thank you very much to Drew for joining me. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you to you good folks at home for joining me. Please, as always, leave any feedback. You can email it to me, or you can join me in the show's forums or anything like that. All of the admin stuff will be linked in the description or show notes associated with this podcast episode. Thank you very much for joining me. And until next time, I've been Chris Ware, and you've been awesome. And I'm off to play some NERTZ.